UAE and Egypt reaching, of course, an agreement for the Ras Al Hikma project with a total investment of $150 billion. Now, what was initially reported was $35 billion. And we do want to get into this, especially lessons for other FX-strapped countries like Nigeria that are in the same group, WhatsApp group, if you will, like Egypt. Very happy to have Arnold Dublin-Green, Chief Investment Officer, Cordros Asset Management, to break it all down for us. Arnold, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
having me. I think I should be saying Happy New Year, right? It's first time.
Yes,
yeah.
Happy New Year to you.
Although it's March, that we're done. Okay, so look, we reported this. A number of other entities reported they were focused on the 35 billion, but you put out on your Substack a breakdown of it's actually 150. So knock it all down for us.
So the project is worth $150 billion. The project is a city that Egypt is building. So it's a city by the coast, about 350 kilometers from Cairo.
Yeah.
It's going to be a city with residential properties, commercial properties, resorts, and international airports. So the project is actually worth $150 billion. But what's happening is the UAE are coming in with $35 billion, and the payments are staggered. So you have $15 billion, which should have come in last week, and then staggered another $20 billion. All
right, so as far as the likely impacts on FX, I think you have pointed out something with the black market in Egypt, but I guess what is supposed to be is it stabilization for the FX market?
It is stabilization, right? So $35 billion injection into an economy, especially in the emerging market space or on the continent, is huge.
Yeah.
On the currency side, Egypt, like Nigeria, has two currencies, so parallel markets and the official markets. So you have the official markets rate about 30 pounds, Egyptian pounds to the dollars, and the parallel market was about 71 or so pounds to the dollars. There's been a huge call for over a year now for devaluation of the pound because it's pegged to the dollar.
Yeah.
And it's causing issues, struggling economy and everything else. And the parallel market is just, the spread between the parallel market currency and the official rate, it's just been widening and widening. But with that injection, we didn't see the official market move, but we saw the parallel market go from 70 odd pounds to the dollar to about 51 or so pounds to the dollar. So it was a huge, should we call it the huge appreciation on the parallel market side?
Yeah. Now, a lot of news about Nigeria's FX backlogs. Apparently, Egypt also has FX backlogs as well. What's that picture looking like for Egypt?
Trade backlog about $5 billion, and then you have portfolio inflows, portfolio FPIs and corporates about $5 to $10 billion.
Okay, now, so we've talked about the FX reaction now. What about Eurobonds for Egypt? At least when you're looking at this, how
so naturally Eurobonds also rally because you have $35 billion in the economy. So there's FX reserves. Going into FX reserves, goes into all the repayment risk or credit risks sort of fizzled away for Eurobond investors. Pre-October or pre-last week, there was an assumption that, following Ghana, following maybe Kenya, following Ethiopia, Egypt was on the list of defaults. So what you had is a 5-year, Egypt 5-year Eurobond is one that I look at closely. You had a 5-year trading in about a 15 to 17% yield. As of when the announcement came in, it went about 500 basis point jump to 10%, and now it's probably about 9%. So you have more confidence in the dollar economy of Egypt and the ability to repay any dollar debt.
Now, speaking of repaying dollar debts, I mean, credit agencies would get in the mix on that
of course,
side.
Yeah.
So what do you expect to happen as far as the ratings outlook on Egypt based on this?
Yeah, so naturally we expect rating agencies to favor Egypt. Moody's, for one, had I think they took Egypt from a B1 to a CAA1 or so in August last year, citing the usual inflation. Inflation was about almost 40% in August. Food inflation was about 70%. You had economic crisis. You had so much going on in Egypt, and as well as the repayment risk, which is huge. So I think following this, especially with payments actually coming in, we should see favorable ratings for Egypt's credit rating.
I know Egypt has its issues with, or rather, emerging markets are a little unsure as to whether to tap the Eurobond market. I just want to come back to Eurobonds. I know Kenya went back to the market. Ivory Coast, the Benin Republic. I guess this depends on whether or not the Fed cuts rates, but how do you see the atmosphere for more Eurobond issuances for emerging markets?
It's obviously favorable. It's shockingly favorable, to be honest, because we've seen US rates still at sort of high levels, higher than it previously was. The Fed taking a different stance as well to Fed rates and to inflation being a bit different and not going according to everyone's plan. We went from potentially the 6 rate cuts down to 3 rate cuts, and now we're not sure anymore with the Fed this year.
Yeah.
But regardless, we're still seeing dollar investors go hard or sort of subscribe heavily into sub-Saharan Africa Eurobonds. So it's interesting. So I think Egypt has a good shoe in there.
Cool. So if you guys at Cordros deal with a number of foreign investors and so on and so forth,
Sure.
especially for Pan-Africa. If one was to ask you, okay, well, Arnold, do we go into Egypt now? What's the outlook? What would you tell a potential investor in Egypt?
So as a dollar investor, I think yes. I think it's a good time to go in. You're still getting cheap bonds, cheaper than the rest of Africa, despite this, because Egypt was in such a bad place that it's taken a while to reprice. But I think once the credit rating agencies come in, once everything sort of calms down, we should see a repricing, and you should enjoy some upside there in Egypt. On the local currency side, there's still a bit of a step back because I mentioned earlier that the Egyptian pound is about £30 to the dollar. The parallel rate is still about 50, 45, 50. There's still a call for devaluation, which should maybe come in at some point this week, pre-Ramadan. Ramadan starts over the weekend,
right.
Or it might come post-Ramadan. But the currency still needs to devalue. So what you're seeing is on the local equity side, the deal was a real estate deal. So you're sort of seeing real estate names trade better. But you're still waiting, the market is still waiting for a devaluation of the currency. Also on the local bond side as well, the market is still waiting for devaluation. But on the Eurobond side, it's a good time to come in.
All right. Speaking of, there was a real estate company that just jumped up and put a video out showing where the buildings, where all the stuff will be taking place. Let's get to Nigeria now.
Okay.
Similar story as we've been saying with Egypt. The presidency, of course, with the Qatar Business Forum. Any lessons, or just Egypt have an advantage that Nigeria doesn't in terms of how they were able to structure this deal?
There might be an advantage being so close to the UAE and being, in sort of I don't want to say Muslim Brotherhood, but in that section. I think that there is an advantage with Qatar coming into Egypt. I know that Qatar has been eyeing some assets. So the Egyptian government have been talking about selling some local assets to raise foreign currency. I know that the Qataris have been eyeing Vodafone, but nothing has come of yet. As for the Qatari pulling any triggers into Nigeria, I really can't speak on that. We just have to wait to see how that goes.
Okay, but I guess speaking just generally, saying with the president trying to woo foreign investors, would a foreign investor looking at a Nigeria want to see the same type of reforms taking place in an Egypt? What's the solution for attracting more investment to Nigeria?
Definitely. I think the right moves are being made right now with NPR interest rates going up, tackling FX liberalization. I think the right moves are being made right now. So I think if things keep going the way they're going, I don't see why foreign investors wouldn't start to look into Nigeria. You
like Nigeria Eurobonds compared to Egypt's Eurobonds?
I like both Eurobonds.
All right, okay. Just a couple minutes ago.
Okay.
Just outlook for Egypt. Before I come to Nigeria, I'll come back to Egypt. Outlook for Egypt for 2024. Do you think things will get better? Because I know the IMF still you've said it. The IMF wants Egypt to devalue more. They're trying to unlock about 10 billion or so from the IMF.
Yeah.
So many things still going on. So how do you see things playing out?
I think this is the year Egypt smooths things over. I think once they devalue, which they've hinted to this week, but it might come after Ramadan. But once that kicks in, I think, and then the IMF then kick in, and then I think things start to look good for Egypt. So I think this year is sort of the turnaround for Egypt. Yeah,
well, good for Egypt. What about Nigeria? What about Nigeria? What is your outlook? What do you say as an outlook for Nigeria? Do certain things need to happen first?
I think certain things are happening.
I know you came here to talk about Egypt, but you don't have to.
I think it's fine. I think certain things are happening. The cycle always takes longer than we all expect.
Got to be patient.
You have to be patient. You have to be patient. But I think if there's any time to come into Nigeria, now is the time. This is close to the turnaround period. Like I said, the cycle always takes longer than we all expect. And this is going to take longer than we expect. But I think the right decisions are being made. There was always going to be a downside, a hard hit for us. But I don't see why, if things don't continue to, if the right decisions don't keep getting made, I don't see why things don't turn out for us.
Arnold, when I introduce you, I feel like I'm introducing a jazz player. You've got one of the most awesome names there. Arnold Dublin-Green. He is the Chief Investment Officer of Cordros Asset Management. Arnold, always a pleasure having you. Thank you for giving us the load on.